My job isn't particularly hazardous, but Coshh does affect me.
I have to think about Coshh every day.
You wouldn't have thought that Coshh affected me either, but it does.
You would be surprised how many people are affected by Coshh in their working lives. The chances are that if you're watching this video, then you are too, perhaps even in ways you'd least expect. So what is Coshh? Coshh is a set of regulations concerning the control of substances hazardous to health. Hazardous substances can take many forms, such as chemicals, fumes, dusts, gases and vapours, and more. Coshh is essentially about knowing what substances could harm you and how best to deal with them. Your job can involve using specific substances as part of the work that you carry out, or substances may even be created as a result of your work. Regardless of the way in which substances are used, there are responsibilities that must be met. Remember that it's not only yourself that can come into contact with substances that are used in your work. Customers, visitors and colleagues can all be affected too. Of course, some substances are clearly recognisable as being hazardous to health. The dangers of coming into contact with coal dust are well known, for example. However, many other things, such as paint or naturally occurring environmental substances, can be equally harmful if precautions are not taken to minimise the risks.
Hot ovens and sharp knives aren't the only things I need to be aware of whilst working here. The dust from this flour, for instance, can cause occupational asthma, if I don't use it safely.
Controlling hazardous substances is a really important part of my job. And it's not just myself I've got to think about either. I've got to make sure that our customers are safe too. People don't think twice when they're filling up their cars with fuel, but actually they're using really dangerous chemicals.
These scissors, bleachers and hair dyes are all pretty hazardous, but having wet hands for most of the day wasn't something that I thought could cause me harm.
Being aware of which hazardous substances are present in your work is the first step. You'll also need to find out exactly how each substance is used and how you can prevent or minimise exposure. So how do you find out which substances are present? Firstly, you can refer to material safety data sheets. Data sheets are supplied with your first delivery of single and mixed chemicals if they're classed as dangerous for supply. They describe the hazards, the substance present, and give information on handling, storage, and emergency measures in case of accident. It's not just industrial chemicals that are covered by Coshh. Other examples include flour, other dusts, and biological substances. Any substance that creates a risk to health because of its properties and the way it's used should have been identified by your employer during a Coshh assessment. To stay safe at work, you'll need to rely heavily on the results of this assessment. Your manager should have the results available for you to view and should communicate them to you. If you're unaware of the results, then ask. Many substances carry hazard warning symbols, which will help you to identify the hazard posed. You'll probably be familiar with these orange warning symbols, but recently these have changed to a new, globally harmonised system that you may be less familiar with. The revised symbols feature an image along with a written description of its meaning and a precautionary statement. Here are some of the most common ones. Formerly, this symbol was used to represent something that is explosive. This is being replaced with this symbol. It will be accompanied by a description such as heating may cause an explosion, and the precaution, keep away from heat or sparks, open flames and so on. This familiar, highly flammable symbol is now replaced by this one. Heating may cause a fire. keep only in original container. This oxidizing symbol now looks like this. The old toxic symbol is now replaced with this one. A dangerous for the environment symbol will now look like this. This symbol is previously known to represent corrosive substances. It now looks like this and can carry any of these meanings. There are also some brand new pictograms. This one refers to long-term health implications such as respiratory problems, asthma, and even cancer. This new pictogram refers to less serious health hazards such as skin irritation. And finally, this new symbol is used when containers hold pressurized gas and therefore may explode when heated. There are dozens of other symbols that you'll be less likely to see, but with their written description and precaution, they're easy to understand. Once you're aware of the hazards, it's time to deal with them. There's a hierarchy of control that illustrates how best to avoid exposure to harmful substances. The most effective option is to completely remove the risk, eliminate the substance from the workplace. The next option is to find a safe alternative that will do the job just as well. If you cannot substitute the substance, try using it in a different form, having a detergent in a liquid or solid form rather than a powder to minimize dust, for example. If you can't prevent exposure, you must use control measures to reduce the risk to as low as reasonably practicable.
To stop myself breathing the dust from this flower, I just changed the way that I work. I'm really careful not to throw the stuff around to create a cloud of dust, and then when I'm cleaning away, I take care.
I only activate the petrol pump when I know that the person using it is safe to do so. They have to be old enough, using approved fuel containers, and obviously not smoking or using anything electrical. I also have to regularly clean up petrol spills.
Frequent contact with water, shampoos and dyes can really irritate my skin. Now, when I'm washing or dyeing a customer's hair, I wear these. They're disposable non-latex gloves. They're really cheap and they do a great job of stopping the irritation. I also like to try and keep the place really well ventilated because obviously a mouthful of hairspray isn't great for anyone's health either.
Hazardous substances can cause you harm through being inhaled, such as fumes, dust and gases, through being absorbed through the skin, through being injected into the skin as a result of an accident or injury, being swallowed accidentally after not washing your hands, or through contact with the eyes from splashes, for example. Control measures can include generally keeping the workplace well ventilated, using extraction systems and keeping them well maintained, total or partial enclosure of work, using approved ways of working that reduce the risk of dust being created, for example, having sufficient training to do the work safely, and keeping good hygiene. Personal protective equipment, or PPE, is the last line of defence in preventing exposure to hazardous substances. Your employer is responsible for providing and maintaining PPE in your workplace free of charge, but you're responsible for ensuring that it's used correctly and must report damaged PPE to management immediately. Depending on the work you do and the hazards present, you'll require different forms of PPE. Respirators, gloves, safety shoes and eye protection are just some of the many forms of PPE that may be required as a result of a Coshh assessment or as advised by the datasheet. The PPE you use should fit correctly, be comfortable, and be kept clean and in good condition. Make sure you're using the right type of protective item. Not all gloves are the same, for example, and they may not be suitable for use with certain substances. Also, never share PPE that touches the skin. Everyone should have their own, and it should be used correctly. Coshh regulations set out work exposure limits, WELs, for hundreds of substances. A WEL is the maximum airborne concentration level of exposure within a given time. It's an offence to exceed the work exposure limit. Control measures and PPE can reduce the risk of exposure to hazardous substances, but you'll still need to keep an eye on your health to make sure that you're not unknowingly being harmed. Health surveillance is important if you're working with hazardous substances. Sometimes it's a legal requirement, but usually it's used as a comfort test to provide reassurance that your health is not being affected and to check that control measures are working. If you feel that you may be suffering as a result of your work, it's essential that you notify management immediately. Unfortunately, despite good working practices and control measures, accidents can still happen. It's therefore good to know what to do in an emergency.
Petrol stations can be highly dangerous places. It's so important that I know what to do in an event of an emergency. If there was a fire here, the results could be devastating.
When working under pressure in a place like this, trying to get food served to 50-odd people, it's easy to make mistakes and have an accident. Everyone working here needs to know the correct procedure to follow in an emergency, whether that's dialing 999 or simply administering first aid.
If there's an accident involving a hazardous substance, you must know where to find the right equipment to deal with the incident and how to use it correctly. That can involve things like the use of spill kits and knowing where to find your company's first aiders. In an emergency, a fast response is vital, so you must be familiar with the right procedures. If you're unsure, then make it your duty to find out. Usually, hazardous substances will require special disposal. They should not be placed with general waste or poured down drains. The material safety data sheet will include details on disposal. If there isn't a data sheet, you should ask management how you should deal with the waste. No matter what line of work you're in, you'll need to understand the importance of controlling hazardous substances. The main aim of Coshh is to avoid exposure altogether. When that's not possible, you should seek ways to replace or reduce the substances you're in contact with, or as a last resort, use protective equipment during your work. Also remember to always follow guidelines for safe storage and disposal of substances, so they remain safe when not in use. Keep a close eye on your own health in the long term and know what to do in the event of an emergency. Taking these steps will go a long way in helping you to stay safe at work. Take care and keep safe.